The ballroom of the Willow Creek Country Club was a masterpiece of understated elegance. Crystal chandeliers scattered diamonds of light across tables draped in ivory linen, each centerpiece a reefily constructed tower of white roses and eucalyptus. The string quartet played a Vivaldi piece that Eleanor Emma Rochemont had heard at 3 other weddings in the past 2 years, but she smiled anyway, because that was what she did. She smiled, and she nodded, and she made herself small. She had been making herself small for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to take up space. 47 years of marriage to a good but demanding man. 34 years of motherhood to a son who had inherited his father's impatience and a daughter who had moved 3,000 miles away. 6 years of widowhood, during which she had quietly, efficiently, become invisible. Eleanor stood in the receiving line with her hands clasped at her waist. Her dove, gray sheath dress a studied exercise in not drawing attention. The dress was 3 years old. Purchased on clearance at a department store, she had driven 40 minutes to reach, because she could not bear the thought of spending full price. The shoes were sensible, low-heeled, the kind that would not hurt her feet after standing for hours. The jewelry was minimal. A string of pierrots Edouard had given her for their 25th anniversary, the only piece of fine jewelry she owned. And the wig. The wig was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, hand-stitched in Milan from real human hair, the exact shade of burnished gold she had worn as a young woman. It had cost nearly $4,000. An obscene sum that had made her wince when she wrote the check. But Edouard had insisted. "You deserve to feel beautiful," he had said, and she had relented. That was 12 years ago. During the chemotherapy, the cancer had been aggressive, and the treatment had been brutal. She had lost her hair within weeks, had spent months looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger's stea ring back. After the surgery, after the remission, her hair had grown back patchy and thin, never quite recovering its former glory. The wig had become her armor. It was the version of Eleanor that could face the world without flinching. The version that could smile at her son's wedding and pretend everything was fine. Everything was not fine. It had not been fine for a long time. The receiving line stretched on, an endless parade of guests Eleanor mostly did not recognize, distant cousins of Vanessa's, their faces arranged in identical expressions of practiced benevolence, colleagues from Derek's law firm, men in expensive suits with wives in expensive dresses, who looked through Eleanor, as if she were part of the furniture, a few of her own friends, the ones who had not drifted away after Edouard died. They smiled at her with pity in their eyes, and she smiled back, because that was what she did. Vanessa, her daughter-in-law, stood at the front of the line in a Varawang gown that cost more than Eleanor's first car. She was a beautiful woman, all sharp pangles and high cheekbones, with the kind of sleek, polished perfection that came from good genes and better dermatologists. She had been Pierrot of this family for 2 years, had sat across from Eleanor at countless dinners, had called her Mom in that perfunctory way of hers, and yet, in all that time, she had never once asked Eleanor a single meaningful question, not about her life before Derek, not about Edouard, not about the cancer, or the chemo, or why she wore a wig that perfectly matched the hair she had lost. Vanessa had never asked because Vanessa had never read to know. To her, Eleanor was simply Derek's mother, an accessory, an obligation, a checkbook. Eleanor had written a check for $20,000 to help pay for the wedding. She had offered it with no strings attached, a gift from a mother to her son. Derek had accepted it with a casual thank you that suggested he had been expecting it all along. He had not asked if she could afford it. He had not asked if she needed the money for herself. He had simply taken it, because that was what he did. He took and he took and he took, and Eleanor gave, because she had spent her entire life giving. She had given him piano lessons when he was a boy, even though he had quit after 6 months. She had given him a car when he turned 16, a used Honda that Edouard had grumbled about but paid for anyway. She had given him college tuition, and law school tuition, and the down payment on his first condo. She had given him birthday parties and holiday dinners and endless, patient encouragement. She had given him everything she had, and he had grown up to become a man who could not be bothered to remember his mother's birthday until his wife reminded him. And now, standing in the receiving line of his wedding, Eleanor understood the quiet, devastating truth of her life. She had spent decades pouring herself into other people, and there was almost nothing left. She was a shell. A woman who had been so thoroughly trained to put others first that she had forgotten she existed at all. The line was thinning, The photographer was circling, a young man with a BARD and a camera that looked like it cost more than her car. He was snapping candids, capturing the champagne flutes and the smiling faces and the general air of celebration. Vanessa was laughing at something one of her bridesmaids had said, her head thrown back, her perfectly white teeth gleaming in the chandelier light. Derek was at her side, beaming with the pride of a man who had landed a woman far out of his league. He was handsome in the way of his father, with the same square jaw and the same impatience set to his mouth. He had aged well, her son, though the gray at his temples was new. She had not noticed it before, and the realization that she was noticing it now, at his wedding, struck her as deeply sad. "Mom, you look tired," Derek said, stepping over to her during a lull in the line. His tone was solicitous, but his eyes were elsewhere, scanning the room for the next person he needed to greet. "Are you getting enough rest? You really should take better care of yourself." "I'm fine, Derek. It's just a long day. Maybe you should sit down for a while." Vanessa's mother said you looked a little pale in the photos. Vanessa's mother, not Eleanor's son, not her own, worried about her well-being. Vanessa's mother, who had probably mentioned it in passing, a casual observation that Derek had turned into a criticism. "I'll be fine," Eleanor said. "I'll sit down after the receiving line." Derek nodded and turned away, his attention already elsewhere. He did not ask if she needed water. He did not ask if she was in pain. He did not ask if the wig was too heavy, or if the heels were too high, or if she was dreading the mother-son dance as much as she was. He simply returned to his wife, and his guests, and his perfect day. The photographer gestured for the family to gather for a group photo. Vanessa's mother, a pinched-faced woman named Emma Rogerie who had never liked Eleanor, took her place at the center. Derek and Vanessa stood beside her, their smiles wide and fixed. Eleanor was positioned at the edge, just out of the primary frame, a fact that did not surprise her. "Closer together," the photographer called out. "Vanessa, can you put your arm around your mother-in-law?" Vanessa's smile tightened. She stepped toward Eleanor, her hand reaching out, her fingers grasping for Eleanor's shoulder, but her grip was seriously too high, too quick. Her manicured nails caught the edge of the wig's lace front, and in one steerald unthinking yank, she pulled it clean off Eleanor's head. The world went silent. Eleanor felt the sudden rush of air on her scalp, the weightlessness where there should have been weight. She felt the cold draft from the air conditioning, the prickle of goosebumps rising on her bare skin. She heard a small gasp from someone nearby, maybe the photographer, maybe Vanessa herself. The wig dangled from Vanessa's fingers like a dead animal, its golden strands swinging in the sudden, terrible silence. Vanessa's face cycled through confusion, shock and then disgust. Real, honest disgust. She stared at Eleanor's bare scalp, at the patchy gray stubble, at the scar that curved behind her left ear like a pale worm. Her mouth opened, and the words that came out were the worst ones she could have chosen. Vanessa said, her voice crying across the ballroom. "What is this? Not, I'm so sorry. Not are you okay? Not even a simple, oh no, just revulsion, pure unfiltered revulsion. As if Eleanor were something dirty, something broken, something to be discarded." Eleanor stood very still. Her hands were at her sides, her posture straight. She had spent 12 years running to be comfortable in this skin, this be scared honest skin. She had looked at herself in the mirror every morning, and told herself she was beautiful. She had accepted the changes, the losses, the betrayals of her own body. She had made peace with the woman she had become. But Vanessa had never seen her, not once. And now, in the ugliest possible way, the truth had been exposed. The whisper stayed. A ripple of murmurs that spread through the crowd like wind through wheat. 200 faces turned toward the receiving line, their expressions a mosaic of pity, curiosity and really concealed glee. This was the drama they had come for. The scandal that would make this wedding memorable. Derek stepped forward, his brow furrowed, his face flushed with embarrassment. "What happened? Mom, are you okay?" Eleanor looked at him, her son, the man she had raised, the man she had sacrificed everything for. He was staring at her bare scalp with the same bewildered expression he had worn when his father died. As if the universe had presented him with a problem he was not equipped to solve. "Your mother wears a wig," Vanessa hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Did you know that? She never told me." Derek's mouth opened and closed. I knew she had some hair issues, but I didn't." "You didn't think to mention it." Vanessa's voice was rising, her cheeks blotchy with rage. "I just made a fool of myself in front of everyone. Everyone. And now they're all staring at us. Like we're some kind of circus act." Eleanor watched her son's face contort with embarrassment. Embarrassment for his wife, not his mother. For the social fuss, not the decades of painful history that had led to this moment. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the same calculation she had seen 100 times before, the one that always ended with Eleanor being asked to be smaller, quieter. Derek said, turning to her with a pleading look, "Can you just put it back on, please? We can talk about this later, but right now, with the photos." Eleanor looked at him, really looked. She saw the gray at his temples, the impatience tightening around his mouth, the way his eyes flicked toward Vanessa every few seconds, seeking approval. She saw the man he had become, and for the first time in her life, she did not make excuses for him. "No," she said. The word hung in the air between them. Derek blinked, clearly not having heard correctly. "No, Derek, I will not put it back on." Eleanor's voice was soft, but it's Sierra. She had spent a lifetime speaking softly, and she had learned that softness could cut just as deep as shouting. "Your wife ripped it off my head in front of 200 people. I am not going to pretend that didn't happen, so that your wedding photos look nice." Vanessa made a sound of outrage. "I didn't rip it off, it was an accident. Anyone could see it was an accident." Wasn't? Eleanor asked. She was not being cruel, she was genuinely curious. She had spent years being the kind of woman who believed the best of people, who assumed good intentions even when the evidence suggested otherwise. But something had shifted in her chest, some door she had kept firmly closed for decades, and it was creaking open. "Of course it was an accident," Derek snapped. "Mom, you're being dramatic. Just put the wig back on and we can all move on. This is supposed to be a happy day." Eleanor looked at her son and saw, in that moment, a lifetime of being asked to smooth things over, of being told she was too sensitive, too fragile. She saw every Christmas she had hosted alone after Edard died, every birthday she had celebrated with a store-bought cake because Derek was too busy to come over. She saw the quiet, unspoken agreement that her needs came last, that her comfort was negotiable, that her presence was tolerated as long as she did not make demands. "I have been happy," Eleanor said, her voice really above a whisper. "I have been happy for you every single day of your life. I have smiled through every slight and every snub. I have made myself small so that you could be big, and I am tired, Derek, I am so tired." The ballroom had gone still, even the string quartet had stopped playing, the violinist frozen with her bow in the air. 200 faces were turned toward the receiving line, watching the family drama unfold like a scene from a play they had not paid to see. Vanessa's face was blotchy with rage. "This is my wedding day, my day. And you're standing here making it all about you and your hairpiece." "It's not about the hairpiece," Eleanor said. "Edna, it's about the fact that you have been rod of this family for 2 years, and you never once asked me a single question about myself. Not one. You never asked about my life before Derek. You never asked about his father. You never asked about the cancer. Or why we are this." She held up the wig, its golden strands catching the light. "You never asked because you never read to know. I was just Derek's mother, an accessory, an obligation." Vanessa's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time since Eleanor had met her, she looked genuinely speechless. Derek stepped forward, his hand reaching for Eleanor's arm. "Mom, that's not fair. Vanessa is just, she's stressed. The wedding has been a lot. You know how she gets." Eleanor pulled her arm away. She had been touched by that hand 1,000 times, but somehow it felt different now, like a stranger's touch. "I know how she gets," she repeated. "I know how you both get. You get busy. You get distracted. You get too wrapped up in your own lives to remember that I exist, and that has been fine, Derek. I made peace with that a long time ago. I told myself it was normal, that children grow up and build their own lives, and that my role was to step back and let you go." She paused, her scalp tingling in the air-conditioned chill, her reflection stared back at her from a mirrored pillar across the room. A woman she barely recognized, not the glamorous blonde in the wig, not the invisible gray-haired widow, someone else entirely, someone who was just now rotting to wake up. "But I am done," Eleanor said. "I am done stepping back. I am done being quiet. I am done pretending that I don't matter, because I do matter, Derek. I have always mattered. I just forgot that for a while." She looked at the wig in her hand, then at the crowd of strangers who had come to celebrate her son's marriage. She thought about the years she had spent worrying about what people thought, about the countless times she had deferred to someone else's comfort. She thought about Edard, and how he had always said she was braver than she gave herself credit for. "People were going to talk," Eleanor said, and a small smile touched her lips. "Let them talk. I have been hiding long enough." She turned away from the receiving line, her head held high, her beer scalp exposed to the light. She walked past the horrified guests and the frozen photographer and the string quartet, who had resumed playing in a nervous, stumbling rendition of Canon in D. She walked past the flower arrangements she had paid for out of her own savings, past the chair she had been assigned at table 7, past the cake that cost more than her first car. She walked all the way to the exit, and she did not look back. The parking lot was empty except for the valets and the distant hum of the interstate. Eleanor reached into her clutch purse and pulled out her keys. She had driven herself to the wedding, a small act of independence that Derek had frowned upon. You should let us send a car, Mom. It's more elegant, but she had insisted, and now she was grateful. She sat in her silver sedan for a long moment, her hands resting on the steering wheel. The wig sat in her lap, a silent testament to all the years she had spent performing femininity, performing normalcy, performing the role of a woman who had everything together. She picked it up and looked at it. It was beautiful, really. The color was perfect, the texture soft, but it was not her. It had never been her. It was a mask she had worn so long she had forgotten what her own face looked like underneath. Eleanor dropped the wig onto the passenger seat and stay-rotted the car. She had no idea where she was going. She only knew she was done being invisible, and whatever came next, it would be on her own terms. She drove out of the country club parking lot, past the manicured hedges and the wrought iron gates, past the life she had built for other people. The sun was setting over the Connecticut hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Eleanor pressed her foot to the accelerator and let the wind rush through her scalp, and for the first time in 47 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten how to name. She felt, but even as the road opened up before her, a quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered that this was only the beginning. The real battle was yet to come, and she would need every ounce of her newfound strength to survive it. She had walked away from the wedding, but she had not walked away from her life, and when she returned, she would not be the same woman who had left. The wig stayed in the passenger seat, and Eleanor Emma Rochmont drove into the fading light, leaving behind the whispers and the pity, and the decades of quiet suffering. She had no plan yet, no grand design, but she had something better. She had the knowledge that she mattered, and she was never going to forget it again. Eleanor Emma Rochmont had been driving for nearly an hour before she realized she had no destination. The sedan's navigation system was DR, and she had not thought to plug in an address. She had simply been following roads, letting the car ride her away from the country club and the champagne, and the 200 stunned faces still frozen in her memory. The sun had dipped below the tree line, and the sky had gone from gold to mauve to a deep, bruised purple. Eleanor pulled into a rest stop off the interstate, the kind with a gas station and a fast food restaurant and a small convenience store that sold overpriced snacks. She parked at the far end of the lot, away from the lights, and let herself breathe. In the quiet of the car, the events of the afternoon began to replay in her mind like a film reel she could not stop. Vanessa's grasping fingers, the sudden, humiliating lightness on her scalp, the gasp from the crowd, Derek's pleading eyes, asking her to be smaller, quieter, less. She had been less for so long, less demanding, less visible, less real. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She had silenced it during the ceremony, and now she saw she had missed 14 calls, 11 from Derek, 2 from her daughter, Claire, who lived in San Francisco and had not been able to make the wedding, 1 from a number she did not recognize, probably Vanessa's mother, calling to demand an apology. She did not return any of them. Instead, she opened her text messages and read the ones Derek had sent, each one more frantic than the last. As Mom, where did you go? Please come back. Vanessa is really upset. This is ridiculous. You're ruining everything. Mom, I'm serious, call me. The last one was just 3 words, sent 20 minutes ago. Are you okay? What? Eleanor stared at that question for a long time. It was the only one that sounded even remotely like concern. But she knew Derek well enough to understand the subtext. Was not a question about her well-being. It was a question about her stability. He was not worried she might be hurt. He was worried she might do something irrational, something that would embarrass him further. She typed a response, her thumbs moving slowly across the screen. I will not be coming back to the reception. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. She hit send before she could second guess herself. Then she powered off the phone and dropped it back into her purse. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for years began to lift, just slightly. It was not relief exactly. It was more like the moment after a long, held breath, when the lungs finally remember how to expand. Eleanor rotted the car again and drove until she found a small motel off the highway, the kind with a flickering neon sign and rooms that cost $60 a night. She paid cash for a single night, declined the front desk clerk's offer of a wake-up call, and let herself into room 14 with a key car that looked like it had been used 1,000 times before. The room was basic, a double bed with a floral bedspread, a television bolted to the dresser, a bathroom with a shower that dripped, but it was quiet and it was anonymous. And no one here knew that she was the woman whose wig had been ripped off at her son's wedding. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her reflection in the mirror above the dresser. The woman who looked back at her was a stranger, not the polished, ring version she had presented to the world for over a decade, not the invisible widow who faded into the background at family gatherings. This woman had a scalp with patches of gray stubble, a web of fine lines around her eyes, and a set to her jaw that she had not seen since she was a young woman, fighting for a place in a man's world. She reached up and touched the scar behind her ear. The skin was smooth and slightly raised, a permanent reminder of the surgery that had saved her life. She had spent years covering it up, ashamed of what it represented, ashamed of the weakness, the vulnerability, the nearness of death, but looking at it now, she felt something different. She felt proud. That scar was proof that she had fought and won. It was proof that she was stronger than the cancer, stronger than the FAR, stronger than the quiet despair that had seeped into her bones in the years since Edouard died. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window. The parking lot outside was empty except for a single pickup truck and a sedan that looked like it had seen better decades. The neon sign flickered in the darkness, its red glow casting a dim light across the asphalt. She thought about Edouard. He had been gone for 6 years now, but she still felt his presence sometimes, like a earth at the edge of her awareness. He had been the only person who had ever seen her clearly. He had known her when she was young and ambitious, when she had worked as a junior accountant at a firm that did not take women seriously. He had watched her fight for promotions and salary increases, and the respect of her male colleagues. He had been her greatest champion, and when the cancer came, he had been her rock. But after he died, something had shifted. The world had stopped treating her as Eleanor Rochmont, the sharp-witted accountant who had built a successful career from nothing. It had started treating her as an elderly widow, a mother, a grandmother, someone to be pitied and patronized, someone to be managed. She had let it happen. She had accepted the smaller portions and the slower service, and the way people talked to her as if she were art of ring. She had accepted Derek's condescension and Vanessa's indifference. She had accepted that her life was in the rear view mirror, that her best years were behind her, that the only role left to her was to fade gracefully into the background. But now, sitting in a motel room off the interstate with her scalp exposed to the cheap fluorescent light, Eleanor felt a spark of something she had not felt in years. It was not rage exactly. It was not even indignation. It was something more fundamental. It was the recognition that she still had choices, that she still had agency, that the story of her life was not over. And she was the only one who got to write the next chapter. She thought about the money. Edouard had been a careful man. He had worked as an engineer for 40 years, and he had invested wisely. He had lived modestly, driven the same car for 15 years, and refused to buy anything on credit. When he died, he had left Eleanor with a portfolio worth just over $3 million. It was not the kind of wealth that made headlines, but it was more than enough to live on, more than enough to be comfortable, more than enough to do something extraordinary. Eleanor had never told Derek the exact amount. He knew his mother was comfortable. Of course, he had seen the house, the car, the modest but well-maintained life she led, but he had no idea about the safe deposit box. He had no idea about the investments. He had no idea that Eleanor Rochmont was a woman of considerable means, because Eleanor Rochmont had been raised not to talk about money. It was vulgar, it was bragging. It was the kind of thing that made people treat you differently. But now she wondered why she had kept it a secret. Was it that if Derek knew the truth, he would start treating her like a bank account rather than a mother? That he would expect her to pay for the wedding, for the house, for the grandchildren who might never come. She had paid for the wedding, of course. She had written a check for $20,000 and told Derek it was a gift, no strings attached. She had not told him that it was a fraction of what she could afford. She had not told him that she was quietly funding his life in ways he would never know. Eleanor sat back down on the bed and pulled out her checkbook. It was a small, leather-bound thing she had carried in her purse for years. She opened it and looked at the balance. It was not the full picture. Most of her assets were tied up in investments and accounts she could not access with a simple check. But it was enough. Enough for a down payment on a new life. Enough to prove a point. She thought about the house. The 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs. The one she had shared with Edward. The one where Derek had grown up. The one Vanessa had redecorated without asking. The one that had never quite felt like Eleanor's, even though her name was on the deed. She had been planning to sell it. Derek had been urging her to downsize for years. You don't need all that space, Mom. It's too much for one person, and the maintenance alone. He was right, of course. The house was too big for her. It was a relic of a life that no longer existed, but it was also hers, and she had held on to it, because letting go felt like giving up. But now, sitting in the motel room, Eleanor made a decision. She would not sell the house. She would not downsize. She would not move into the assisted living community Derek had been subtly suggesting for the past 2 years. She would keep the house, and she would renovate it. And she would turn it into something that reflected her, not the memory of Edouard, not the expectations of her children. Something that announced to the world that Eleanor Ma Rachmont was still here, and she was not finished yet. The decision sent a small thrill through her chest. It was so small, so practical, and yet it felt revolutionary for years. She had been deferring to Derek's opinions on everything, where to live, what to drive, how to spend her time. He had been so confident in his judgment, so certain that he knew what was best for her. And she had let him make decisions, because it was easier than fighting, but she was done with easy. She was done with the path of least resistance. Eleanor pulled out her phone and turned it back on. The screen lit up with a cascade of notifications, all of them variations on the same theme. Derek, a few from Claire, who had heard what happened from one of the wedding guests, and wanted to know if her mother was all right. A few from the number she did not recognize, which turned out to be Vanessa's mother, leaving a voicemail that Eleanor did not bother to listen to. She scrolled past all of them and opened her banking app. The balance was there, as she knew it would be. She had been watching it grow for years, never touching it, never spending more than she needed. Edouard had always said she was too frugal, that she should enjoy the fruits of their labor, but she had been afraid of running out, afraid of being a burden, afraid of what people would think if she spent money on herself. But she was done with that too. She transferred $10,000 into her checking account. Then she called the hotel and booked a suite, not the motel room, but the Grand Hyatt in the city. The one with the marble lobby and the views of the skyline. She did not see if it was extravagant. She had spent a lifetime pinching pennies, and she had earned the right to be extravagant. The front desk clerk on the phone sounded surprised when she asked for the presidential suite. I'm sorry, that's our most expensive room. Are you sure you want? I am quite sure, Eleanor said, her voice calm and firm. I will be checking in tomorrow morning. Please have a bottle of champagne waiting in the room, not the cheap kind. Something from a good year. She hung up before the clerk could ask any more questions. Then she lay back on the motel bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. The champagne would be a waste, probably. She was not much of a drinker. But it was the principle of the thing. It was the act of choosing something luxurious, something frivolous, something for herself. Eleanor's phone buzzed with another call. Derek, she let it go to voicemail. Then she closed her eyes and let herself drift toward sleep. A small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of her life. She had no idea what it would bring, but for the first time in a very long time, she was looking forward to finding out. She had the key to the safe deposit box in her purse, and she knew exactly what she needed to do next. The money was just a tool, but it was a powerful one, and Eleanor Ma Rachmont was finally ready to use it. The presidential suite of the Grand Hyatt was everything Eleanor had hoped for and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline, the morning sun painting the glass and steel in shades of amber and rose. The living room was furnished with plush sofas in muted cream, a marble coffee table that gleamed like polished ice, and fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases on every surface. The bedroom beyond was a sanctuary of white linens and down pillows, and the bathroom, she had counted, was larger than her first apartment. But Eleanor rarely noticed any of it. She stood at the window with a cup of room service coffee in her hand, her scalp still exposed to the world, and she thought about what came next. She had spent the night in the motel room, sleeping fitfully, dreaming of Edouard and the life they had built together. In the dreams, he was young again. With his thick brown hair and his steady, knowing smile, he was holding her hand, telling her she was brave, telling her she could do anything she set her mind to. She had woken up with tears on her cheeks and a strange, unfamiliar sense of purpose burning in her chest. The wig was still in the car, abandoned on the passenger seat like a discarded costume. She had not brought it up to the suite. She was not sure if she would ever wear it again. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. She had turned it back on after checking in, and the notifications had been relentless. Derek had called another 12 times. Claire had called twice and left a voicemail. Vanessa's mother had texted a single line that read, "You owe my daughter an apology." Eleanor had deleted that message without reading it twice. She picked up the phone now and called Claire. Her daughter answered on the first ring. "Oh my God, I've been so worried. Are you okay? What happened? Derek called me last night and he was practically hysterical. He said you walked out of the reception, and no one knew where you went." Claire had always been the one who read. She was the one who called every Sunday, who remembered birthdays, who asked about her mother's life in a way that was genuine rather than perfunctory. She lived 3,000 miles away, but she had never made Eleanor feel abandoned. "I'm fine, sweetie Artie, I'm in the city. I checked into a hotel last night." "The city? Which city, Mom? You're ring me." "I'm not trying to you, I just needed some time to think." Eleanor paused, gathering her thoughts. "Claire, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you about your father." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, Dad's been gone for 6 years. What do you mean?" "I mean the money, Claire. The money your father left me. It's a lot more than you think." Eleanor had never told Claire the full extent of her inheritance. She had been as secretive about it as she had been with Derek, perhaps more, because Claire was more likely to ask questions, to press for details. But sitting in the luxury suite, looking out at the city skyline, Eleanor realized that secrecy had been a mistake. It had isolated her. It had made her vulnerable to the kind of manipulation she had suffered at Vanessa's hands. "Mom, what are you talking about? How much money?" "About $3 million more, with interest. Your father and I were very careful. We saved everything we could, and he invested well. I never told anyone because I didn't want it to change things. I didn't want people to treat me differently." Claire let out a low whistle. $3 million, Mom. That's incredible. But why are you telling me now? "Because I'm done hiding," Eleanor said. "I spent yesterday getting publicly humiliated by your brother's wife, and I realized something. I have been making myself small for too long. I have been pretending to be less than I am, because I was afraid of what people would think. But I am done with that. I am going to start living my life on my own terms. And I want you to know the truth." Claire was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I should have been there. I should have come to the wedding. You had to work, sweetheart. I understand. Work isn't more important than you. It never has been." Claire's voice broke slightly. "I've been feeling guilty for years, living so far away. I always told myself you were fine, that Derek was taking care of you. But I knew, Mom. I knew he wasn't really there for you." Eleanor felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She had not cried the day before. Not when the wig was ripped off. Not when her son had pleaded with her to put it back on. But hearing her daughter's voice, feeling the genuine concern in every word, something inside her cracked open. "It's not your fault, Claire. It's not anyone's fault. I let myself become invisible. I let myself believe that I didn't matter. But I am going to change that. I don't know how yet, but I am going to change it. You already have, Mom. You walked out of that wedding. That took so much strength, you don't even realize." Eleanor laughed, a small watery sound. "I don't feel strong, I feel scared. I have no idea what I'm doing. I checked into this hotel, and I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with myself." "Then figure it out," Claire said firmly. "Take some time, buy some new clothes, go to do something that makes you happy. You've earned it, Mom. You've earned every penny of that money." The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor had spent so many years denying herself that the idea of doing something just for herself felt almost illicit. But Claire was right. She had earned it. She had spent a lifetime taking care of others, and it was finally time to take care of herself. "I love you, Claire," Eleanor said. "I don't say that enough. I love you too, Mom, and I'm here for you, whatever you need." After she hung up, Eleanor sat for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The champagne was still chilling, the strawberries untouched. She thought about the house, and the renovations she had planned. She thought about the wig in her car. The one she had left on the passenger seat as a symbol of everything she was leaving behind. She thought about Derek and Vanessa. And the life she had been living for them, not for herself. She had been so focused on being a good mother, a good wife, a good grandmother, that she had forgotten to be a good person to herself. She had let her identity become defined by her relationships to others, rather than by who she was as an individual. And somewhere along the way, she had lost herself, but she was finding herself again, slowly, painfully but undeniably. The woman who had walked out of that wedding was not the same woman who had walked in. That woman had been invisible, voiceless. This woman was just beginning to understand the power she had always possessed. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window. The city was fully awake now. The streets crowded with people rushing to work. She watched them for a while, anonymous faces in the crowd, all of them with their own stories, their own struggles, their own moments of quiet rebellion. She thought about the photograph she had seen in the hotel lobby, a black and white image of a woman standing on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The caption read, "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." She had always dismissed those kinds of platitudes as empty. The kind of thing people said when they did not know what else to say. But now, standing in the luxury suit with $3 million in the bank, and a lifetime of subservience behind her, she understood the truth of it. She was afraid, she was terrified, actually, but she was going to do it anyway. She was going to reclaim her life, on her own terms, and she was not going to let anyone stop her. Eleanor picked up the phone and called the front desk. "I need a car," she said. "Driver, I need to go shopping." The driver arrived in a sleek black sedan within 20 minutes. He was a young man with a professional demeanor and a name tag that read, A. Arcus. He held the door for her. And she slid into the leather back seat like she had been doing it her whole life. "Ma'am," Arcus asked. Eleanor gave him the address of a boutique she had read about in a magazine years ago, a place that specialized in clothes for women of a certain age who refused to look frumpy. She had never read to visit it before, had always told herself it was too expensive, too extravagant, too much, but now she was ready. The boutique was in a rod of the city she had never visited, a street lined with high-end shops and art galleries. The saleswoman who greeted her was named Marguerite, a willowy Frenchwoman with silver hair and an elegant manner. She took one look at Eleanor's scalp and her sensible, out-day, and her face softened into something approaching respect. "Madame, what a pleasure to have you here. May I ask, what are you looking for today?" "Everything," Eleanor said. "I need a complete wardrobe. Something that makes me feel powerful." Smiled. "I think I can help with that." The next 2 hours were a revelation. Eleanor tried on dresses and suits and blouses, each one more beautiful than the last. She chose fabrics she had never allowed herself to buy: silk, cashmere, fine Italian wool. She chose colors she had always been told did not suit her: deep burgundy, emerald green, royal blue. She chose styles that were fitted and flattering, not the shapeless sacks she had been wearing for years. She bought 5 dresses, 3 suits, a dozen blouses, and a cashmere coat that cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. She bought shoes and handbags and a pair of diamond study rings that sparkled like tiny stars. She bought everything with the quiet, steady confidence of a woman who was no longer afraid to spend money on herself. Marguerite wrapped the purchases in tissue paper and placed them in elegant shopping bags. "Madame, you have exquisite taste. It was a pleasure assisting you." "Thank you," Eleanor said. "I'll be back." She walked out of the boutique feeling like a different person. The clothes were just fabric, she knew that, but they were also more. They were a statement. They were proof that she was no longer willing to disappear. Her phone buzzed as she got back into the car. It was Derek. She let it go to voicemail. Then she saw that he had sent a text, and against her better judgment, she opened it. "Mom, we need to talk. Vanessa is threatening to sue you for emotional distress. She says you ruined her wedding day. I don't know what to do. Please call me." Eleanor read at the screen. The audacity of it, the sheer, breathtaking audacity. Vanessa had ripped off her wig in front of 200 people, had humiliated her in the most public way imaginable. And now she was threatening legal action. Something inside Eleanor shifted. The fear she had been crying for so long began to curdle into something else. Something odder, something colder. She typed a response, her fingers steady. "Tell Vanessa she can sue me if she wants. I have excellent lawyers, and I have a very long memory. I suggest she thinks carefully before she starts a guiar she cannot win. She hit send and pocketed the phone. Then she leaned back in the leather seat and watched the city glide past the tinted windows. She had no idea what the next few weeks would bring. She only knew that she was done being a victim. She was done being invisible. She was done letting other people write her story. The fight was just beginning, and Eleanor Rochemont was ready. Eleanor did not sleep that night. She lay in the vast king-sized bed of the presidential suite, staring at the shadows cast by the city lights on the ceiling, and she replayed every moment of the past 48 hours. The wig, Derek's pleading eyes, Vanessa's disgust, the threat of a lawsuit. She had never been sued before. She had never even been in a courtroom except for the time she served on a jury 30 years ago. The idea of being dragged into litigation by her own daughter-in-law was so absurd, so grotesque that she almost laughed, but she did not laugh. She lay there in the darkness, her bare scalp pressed against the cool silk of the pillowcase, and she let herself feel the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface for years, not just at Vanessa, though Vanessa had erased her chérie. At Derek. At the world that had told her she was too old, too fragile, too unimportant to matter, at herself, for believing it. By the time the sun rose, Eleanor had made a decision. She was not going to hide, she was not going to apologize. She was not going to let Vanessa's threats intimidate her into shrinking back into the invisible woman she had been before. She was going to fight. The first thing she did was call her lawyer. His name was Richard Holloway, a silver-haired gentleman in his 70s who had handled Edward's estate and had been Eleanor's legal advisor for over 20 years. He was old-school, meticulous, and utterly unflappable. If anyone could help her navigate the mess Vanessa was threatening to create, it was him. Richard answered on the second ring. Eleanor, I was wondering when you'd call. I heard about the wedding. News travels fast, Eleanor said dryly. Big gossip. I assume you're calling about the lawsuit threat. Eleanor blinked. You already know about that. Vanessa's mother has been calling everyone she knows. She's telling people you assaulted her daughter, that you caused a scene, that you intentionally humiliated the bride. Richard's voice was calm, professional. But there was a note of something in it that might have been amusement. I've already drafted a cease and desist letter. I was going to send it to you for approval. Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Richard, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just tell me what you want to do. Eleanor took a breath. She thought about the years she had spent being quiet, being accommodating, being less. She thought about the wig in her car, the symbol of all the masks she had worn. She thought about Derek's text, his tone of panic, his implicit assumption that she would back down and make things right. I want to fight, she said. I want to make it clear that I will not be bullied. I want to show them that I am not the woman they think I am. Richard was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was armed with approval. I was hoping you'd say that. I've been waiting for this, Eleanor. I've been watching you shrink yourself for years, and it's been hard to watch. You're one of the strongest women I know. It's about time the rest of the world saw it. Eleanor smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was real. What do I need to do? I'll send over the cease and desist letter. You sign it, and I'll file it. If Vanessa or her mother tries to make good on their threats, we'll sue for defamation and emotional distress. Given the circumstances, I think we have a very strong case. Countersue, absolutely. Public humiliation, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The list goes on. Richard's voice was matter of fact. Vanessa made a spectacle of you at her wedding. She ripped off your medical device in front of 200 people. She then proceeded to accuse you of ruining her day. If anyone has grounds for a lawsuit, it's you. Eleanor felt a thrill run down her spine. She had never thought of it that way. She had been so focused on her own shame, her own embarrassment, that she had forgotten she was the wronged party. Vanessa had been the aggressor. Vanessa had been the one who had crossed a line. Send me the letter, Eleanor said. I'll sign it today. She hung up and sat in the silence of the suite. The champagne was still in its bucket, the strawberries untouched. She had not eaten anything since the day before, but she was not hungry. She was too full of something else, a strange, electric energy that made her hands tremble and her hair race. She thought about Derek. She had not spoken to him since the wedding. She had not responded to his texts or his calls. Part of her was afraid to hear his voice, afraid of what he might say. But another part of her, the part that was waking up after decades of sleep, was simply done with him, done with his demands, done with his excuses, done with the endless, exhausting work of loving a man who did not love her back. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and saw Claire's name. Hey, sweetheart, Eleanor said. I just heard from Derek, he's freaking out. He says you're threatening to sue them. Eleanor sighed. I'm not threatening anything, I'm responding to a threat. Vanessa's mother is telling everyone I assaulted her daughter. Derek texted me saying Vanessa is planning to sue me for emotional distress. I've retained Richard to protect myself. Claire was quiet for a moment. Mom, that's actually brilliant. I mean, it's insane that it's come to this, but it's brilliant. It's not brilliant, it's just self-preservation. No, Mom, it's more than that. It's the first time I've seen you stand up for yourself in. I don't know, ever. Claire's voice was thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She had been holding them back for so long, had been so careful to be strong, to be the matriarch everyone expected her to be. But hearing her daughter's voice, feeling the genuine pride in every word, something inside her finally let go. I'm red, Claire, she admitted. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never been in a situation like this before. I know you're red, but you're doing it anyway. That's what courage is, Mom. Eleanor wiped her eyes. I love you. You know that. I love you too. And I'm coming to visit. I booked a flight. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. Eleanor's hair lifted. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. You're my mother. And you're going through something huge. I want to be there for you. Besides, Claire added, her voice lightening, I want to see the look on Vanessa's face when she realizes she picked a fight with the wrong woman. Eleanor laughed. It was the first genuine laugh she had let out in months, and it felt like medicine. After she hung up, Eleanor stood and walked to the window. The city was bustling below, cars and people streaming through the streets in endless motion. She watched them for a while, letting the noise and the movement wash over her. She thought about the house, the colonial in the suburbs that had been her home for 40 years. She had been planning to sell it, to move into something smaller and more manageable, but now she was not so sure. The house was hers, it had been hers for decades, and she had let Derek and Vanessa treat it like it belonged to them. She thought about the renovations, the kitchen Vanessa had redesigned without asking, the rooms that had been filled with Edward's things, then emptied after he died, the space that had become a museum of a life she no longer lived. What if she didn't sell it? What if she kept it and made it hers again? What if she turned it into something that reflected the woman she was becoming, not the woman she had been? The idea took root in her mind and grew. She could renovate the kitchen, tear out the cold white marble and replace it with arm wood. She could turn Edward's study into a reading room, a sanctuary where she could sit and think and plan. She could fill the house with color and life, and all the things she had denied herself for so long. It would be expensive, but she had the money. She had more than enough. Eleanor picked up her phone and called a real estate agent she had met years ago at a charity event. I need a contractor, she said. A good one. Someone who can handle a major renovation. The agent promised to make some calls. Eleanor hung up and sat back on the sofa, a plan beginning to form in her mind. She was not just going to fight Vanessa. She was going to build something. She was going to reclaim her life, her home, her identity. She was going to show everyone, including herself, that she was not finished yet. The cease and desist letter arrived via email an hour later. Eleanor read it through twice, then signed it with a steady hand. She sent it back to Richard with a note. File it, and let me know what happens next. Then she stood up, walked to the bedroom, and changed into one of her new outfits. A deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves and made her feel like a different person. She put on the diamond studs she had bought, the first real jewelry she had purchased for herself in decades. She looked in the mirror and saw a woman she almost recognized. She was still scared, but she was also excited. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to what the future might bring. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and saw Derek's name. This time she answered. Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days. I know, Eleanor said. I've been busy. Busy doing what? Vanessa is losing her mind. She says you're threatening to sue her. She says your lawyer sent her some kind of legal letter. Mom, you can't do this. She's my wife. She's family. Eleanor took a breath. She thought about all the years she had spent making excuses for him. All the time she had told herself he was just busy. Just trying to balance his own life. All the times she had let him off the hook, because it was easier than demanding more. She's your wife, Eleanor agreed. She's family. and she humiliated me in front of 200 people. She tore off my wig and looked at me like I was something disgusting. And you stood there and asked me to put it back on, so that your wedding photos would look nice. Mom, that's not. It's exactly what happened, Derek. I was there. I remember Eleanor's voice was calm. Steady. I have spent my entire life making things easy for you. I have given you everything I had. And the one time I needed you to stand up for me, you didn't. You stood there and watched your wife treat me like garbage, and you said nothing. Derek was silent. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. Could he hear the faint rustle of his expensive suit as he shifted in his chair? I'm not going to back down, Eleanor said. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to make this go away so that you can pretend everything is fine. Vanessa made a choice. I'm making a choice too, and my choice is to fight. Mom, please. Think about what you're doing. This is going to tear the family apart. Eleanor laughed. It was a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Derek, the family was already torn apart. I was just the only one who didn't notice. She hung up before he could respond. Then she sat in the quiet of the suite, her hands trembling slightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. She had said the words she had been holding back for decades. And even though she was shaking, even though part of her wanted to call him back and apologize, she knew she had done the right thing. The duel was just beginning, but Eleanor Rochemont was finally ready to fight. And she had a feeling she was going to win. 3 weeks had passed since the wedding, 3 weeks of silence, of legal letters, of the slow, painful process of rebuilding. Eleanor had not returned to the house in the suburbs. She had not spoken to Derek since the phone call in the suite. She had not seen Vanessa at all. Instead, she had thrown herself into the renovation. The contractor Richard had recommended was a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who looked at the colonial with the same critical eye Eleanor had ran to turn on herself. Together, they had gutted the kitchen and replaced the cold white marble with warm butcher block and sage green cabinets. They had painted over the beige walls with a deep, soothing tea. They had turned Etta Ardy's study into a sun-drenched reading room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a window seat that overlooked the backyard. Every decision Eleanor made was a small act of rebellion. The new furniture was not what Eddie Arad would have chosen. The Arad on the walls was not the safe, neutral landscapes Derek had approved. It was bold and colorful and alive. Just like the woman Eleanor was becoming. Claire had arrived the day after the phone call, and had stayed for a week. They had talked late into the night, drinking wine and eating takeout. And Eleanor had told her daughter everything. The cancer, the chemo, the wig, the years of quiet desperation. Claire had listened without judgment. Her hand wrapped around her mother's, her eyes wet with tears. You should have told me, Claire had said. I would have come home. I would have helped. I know, Eleanor had replied. But I didn't want to be a burden. You were never a burden, Mom. You were the one crying all of us. The words had stayed with Eleanor, echoing in her mind as she watched the renovation take shape. She had been crying them all, Dara, even Vanessa, and she had been doing it alone, but she was done crying. She was done being the foundation upon which other people built their lives. It was time to build something for herself. The cease and desist letter had worked. Vanessa's mother had stopped calling. The threats of a lawsuit had evaporated as quickly as they had read. Richard had sent a terse follow-up letter reminding Vanessa that Eleanor had grounds for a counter-suit, and that had been the end of it. No apology, no explanation, just silence. Eleanor did not mind. She had not expected an apology. She had learned that people like Vanessa did not apologize. They only moved on to the next target. But she had heard from Derek. He had called 3 times in the past week, each call more plaintive than the last. He wanted to talk, he wanted to explain, he wanted to fix things. Eleanor had not called him back. She was not ready. She was not sure she would ever be ready. The morning of the unveiling was crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day that made Connecticut look like a postcard. Eleanor stood in the backyard of the Colonial, her scalp arm in the sun. And she looked at the house she had made her own. The renovations were complete. The contractor had done beautiful work. The kitchen gleamed with new appliances and fresh paint. The reading room was a sanctuary of light and color. The master suite had been transformed into a feminine retreat, all soft fabrics and muted florals. And the backyard had been entirely redone, with a stone patio and a fire pit and a garden that was already beginning to bloom. It was hers, all of it, not Edouard, not Derek's, not anyone else's, hers. She had invited Claire to come back for the unveiling. She had invited her friends from the bridge club, the ones who had stuck by her through the years. She had even invited Derek, though she was not sure he would come. The PRI was small. Just a dozen people gathered on the new patio with glasses of champagne and plates of catered appetizers. Claire was there, beaming, her arm linked through her mother's. The bridge club ladies were exclaiming over the renovations, their voices bright with approval. Even Patricia the contractor had stayed, accepting compliments with a modest shrug. And then, just as Eleanor was beginning to relax, she saw the silver sedan pull into the driveway. Derek stepped out of the car alone. He was dressed in a suit, his hair roughly combed, his face a mask of nervous determination. He walked toward the patio with the hesitant steps of a man who was not sure he would be welcome. Eleanor watched him approach. Her heart was pounding, but her face was calm. She had been dreading this moment, had imagined it 100 different ways in the weeks since the wedding, but now that it was here, she felt strangely at peace. Derek said, stopping a few feet away from her. You look different. Eleanor smiled. I am different. He looked around at the Roddy, at the house, at the garden that had replaced the overgrown lawn he had always complained about. You did all this. All of it. With a little help from Patricia and a lot of help from Claire. Derek's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the boy he had been. The one who had brought her dandelions and told her she was the prettiest mommy in the world. Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Eleanor studied him. She had been waiting for these words for weeks, had imagined the relief they would bring. But now that they were here, she felt only a quiet, steady calm. The words were not enough, they could never be enough, but they were a start. I know, she said. I know you, Eric. I should have said something at the wedding. I should have stood up for you. I was so caught up in everything. Vanessa was so, and I didn't want to make it worse. And I thought if I could just get you to put the wig back on, everything would be fine. He shook his head, his eyes bright with tears. I was an idiot. I was so worried about keeping the peace that I didn't see I was breaking something more important. Eleanor nodded slowly. You broke my trust. Derek. That's not something you can fix with a single apology. I know that. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm just asking you to let me try. I want to be better. I want to be the son you deserve. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. She thought about all the years she had spent waiting for this. All the times she had hoped he would see her, really see her, and acknowledge the sacrifice she had made. She had built her life around his needs, and he had taken it for granted, but she had let him. She had taught him that she was a resource to be used, not a person to be loved. That was going to change. Both of them were going to change. Let's take a walk, Eleanor said. Just the two of us. She led him away from the PRI, past the garden and the fire pit, to the old oak tree at the edge of the property. It had been there when she and Ard had bought the house, and it would be there long after she was gone. She reached up and touched one of its branches, feeling the rough bark against her palm. This tree has been here for 100 years, she said. Rain, snow, storms, children climbing in its branches, and it's still standing. Derek nodded, not understanding. I'm like this tree, Eleanor said. I've been through a lot. I've weathered storms that would have broken other people, but I'm still standing. And I'm not going to let anyone knock me down again. Derek's face went pale. I never wanted to knock you down. I know you didn't. But you didn't stop Vanessa from trying. And that's the part I need you to understand. You stood by while she humiliated me. You asked me to cover it up, so that you could have a perfect day. You made it clear that my comfort, my feelings were secondary to hers. Eleanor met his eyes, her gaze steady and unflinching. That can't happen again. If you want to be part of my life, you need to prove that I matter to you. In actions. Derek swallowed. I understand. I don't think you do, not yet. But I'm willing to give you the chance to Aaron. Eleanor reached into her pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She opened it and tipped its contents into her palm. It was the wig, the gold Milan wig she had worn for 12 years. The one Vanessa had torn off her head. I'm never wearing this again, Eleanor said. Not because I'm ashamed of it, but because I don't need it anymore. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. This wig was a mask, and I'm ready to take the mask off for good. She held it out to Derek. I want you to have it, not as a keepsake, as a reminder every time you see it. I want you to remember what happened at that wedding. I want you to remember that you stood by while your wife humiliated me. And I want you to think about the kind of man you want to be. Derek took the wig with trembling hands. He stared at it, his face pale, his eyes wet. I don't deserve this. Eleanor agreed. You don't, but I'm giving it to you anyway, because I believe in second chances, and because I love you, even when you make it hard. She turned and walked back toward the PRT, leaving him standing under the oak tree. She did not look back. She did not need to. She had said what she needed to say, and the rest was up to him. The PRT was still going strong when she returned. Claire was laughing with the bridge club ladies. The champagne was flowing. The autumn sun was warm on Eleanor's scalp. She stood on the edge of the patio and looked at the house she had rebuilt. It was beautiful, it was hers, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Claire Appy read at her side and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You okay, Mom? Eleanor smiled. I'm better than okay, I'm free. She looked up at the sky, at the clouds drifting lazily across the blue, and she thought about Eduard. She wondered if he could see her now, if he was proud of the woman she had become. She thought about the cancer, and the chemo, and the wig she had worn for so long. She thought about Derek and Vanessa and all the years she had spent making herself small. She was done with all of it. She was a woman of 67, with gray stubble on her scalp, and $3 million in the bank and a house that finally felt like home. She was a woman who had been invisible for too long and was finally, irrevocably. Let's go inside, Eleanor said. I want to show you the reading room. She led her daughter through the house, past the new kitchen and the new furniture, and the new life she had built. And when she looked in the mirror in the hallway, she saw a woman she recognized. A woman with a BA scalp and a steady gaze and a future she could not wait to live. The wig was gone, the mask was off, and Eleanor May Rochmont was ready for whatever came next.